Okay. So I've owned firearms for a little while, though I didn't own what I now call lovingly the Rootin' Tootin' Cowboy gun. That's actually its official model name. And here for Twitch purposes, again, we're displaying, not brandishing. It is unloaded. See, look, it's a Rootin' Tootin' Cowboy gun. Sure, as you can see, it is indeed rootin'. It is indeed tootin'. See, it has all the requirements. It's a nice gun. I like it. It feels good. And when I got it, I remembered that people in chat have been asking me to talk about my opinions on guns for a while now, and I figured, were there ever a time? Maybe I wanted to do it at the range, but then I remembered how bad I am at shooting. So far, not going to embarrass myself for a video quite like that. Not yet. So, it's at the SW Model 12, the 19 Classic. The 19 Classic. So, people ask me often about guns and what my opinions are on guns. I've talked about it a little bit before, but I'm going to talk about it more now, maybe even extensively now. Because guns are both a boon and a problem, and the problems we have with guns are very specific to America. You know what they say, that Onion article? No way we could have prevented this, said man from only country where this always happens. You know what I mean? Whether you're talking mass schoolings, whether you're talking mass shootings or school shootings or domestic homicide or God knows whatever else terrible things people do with firearms, we do have a problem with them in this country. Now, the easy line for leftists is under no pretext shall arms be school shootings. Thank you. But you know what? I didn't like school either. The common leftist line is under no pretext. Like, everyone deserves a gun, firearms for all, so on and so forth. The reason leftists say that is because one of the ways that states consolidate their power is through a monopolization, both on the legal means to commit and the ability to commit violence. So right now, who can legally commit violence in America? Well, the police and the military, unless you're acting specifically in self-defense or it's some niche issue. They're the ones who get to shoot people. That's their job. Not the average person's job. That's their job. We've moved away from vigilantism and more towards the centralization of power. And there are benefits to that, by the way. Vigilantism causes a lot of problems, and people who are a little bit itchy with their trigger finger have led to many a corpse left out in the woods with not an investigation to be done type deal. So there are benefits to the consolidation of that power. But there are also downsides that I'll talk about in a little bit. Back when Marx said, under no pretext shall the, arms be surrendered from the proletariat, he was talking in what was undeniably a different time. If you're a good Marxist, you'll know subjects like this have to be discussed within the context of the material conditions in which they were written. And back when Marx was writing that, as I understand it, now I'm not a history savant, but back then I'm pretty sure that the main way that wars were conducted where people would stand 500 feet from each other, fire one round out of a 26-pound gun, and then run forward to bludgeon each other to death with the butts of them. I think that more or less, that's sort of the vibe we were on at that time, which meant a couple of things. First and foremost, that an individual owning a firearm didn't present a mass shooting threat. There were no mass shootings back then. Guns couldn't fire that many times. They weren't as tactically viable as modern-day firearms, where even semi-automatic weapons can hold 20, 30, 40 shots. I think actually around the time of Marx, they did have repeating weapons, but all the same, not the way we do now. The other main difference between now and then is that back then, the idea of the proletariat rising up to overthrow their government was feasible. I mean, it happened, But if you live in America today and you know anything about the way our military functions and the kind of tech they have on their hands, you will know, and this is a fact, I'm afraid, that no, not with all the guns in the world. No. You need military equipment to face modern militaries. Civilian revolutions do not work against developed first world nations. They may work in some parts of the world, maybe they're less developed, the developing nations, maybe there, but here not so much. So, what changed? What are the problems we face? And what can we do about them? America land of the free, has about 400 million firearms in it. This is, I don't know how much this is relative to the total number of guns in the world, but let's just say it's infinity. There is an infinite number of guns in America. There are more guns in America than there are people in America. A lot of those guns are hunting weapons. You know, you have old rifles and shotguns that are used for hunting or for target practice or pellets or what have you. You have handguns, which are by far the most deadly firearm we have because handguns can be concealed. Rifles cannot be concealed, at least not easily, which means that handguns are much more versatile and much easier to use for crimes. And then you have larger weapons that are essentially civilian remakes of military-style guns, like an AR-15, which in most places in America you can't fire automatically, but it's, you know, it's like it's a military rifle. You know, you can imagine it. When the people buy their AR-15s, they strap it on. They've got all the scopes and gadgets on there. They run around. They feel like, yeah, it's like I'm back in Iraq. You know, at least it feels closer to it. So, with all that being said, America, with our tremendous appreciation for firearms, has a lot of deaths because of firearms. Now, a lot of lefties just kind of don't like to talk about this. Like, either they'll ignore the question entirely, or if presented with this information, they will say those deaths are worth it for the fact that the proletariat is armed, you know? And I'm not particularly convinced by those arguments for a couple of reasons, which I'll touch on shortly, but let's actually talk about the harm that guns do in this country. First and foremost, America, we're the capital of mass shootings, baby. Okay? We are. We get a lot of them. A lot of them. Way more than we should. And, Jesus, wind's blowing doors over there. We also get, and this is terrifying to me, school shootings in an unprecedented number here in America. There are schools, elementary schools, that will train kids for shooting drills. That's actually common. I got trained that. And that was back in the mid-2000s. I mean, it was after Columbine, but it's more than a decade ago. Nowadays, there are companies that will market Kevlar backpacks to students. I mean, 10-year-old kids, here's a Kevlar backpack. Good luck. Jesus. It's fucking terrifying. It is. That's not normal and it's not defensible. It's just not. There was even a school that was being remodeled in a way which was designed to make it difficult for school shooters to rack up a significant number of kills. That's a real thing. It was a big publicity thing. There were media there. There was a school. They were like, okay, and here the firing lines are obstructed. And yeah, this hallway, like it's harder to get around this way. It's like they actually built it specifically. I mean, this is a center for learning, and they built it for this. Probably cost a lot of money too. And I imagine all the school kids running around there every day. They'll be reminded, hey, what's that little concrete jutting out thing for? Oh, that's if a school shooter comes, you're supposed to hide behind that. Oh, cool. We have those. We also have gun suicides. See, there are a lot of sad people, and maybe more than normal these days. And suicide is sometimes something that people plan out, and sometimes it is very much not. If you have a brief moment of suicidal ideation, there is nothing that can affect your death more instantly than a gun. There's nothing. There's nothing else even comes close. All it takes is just access to a firearm. That's the reason, by the way, why this has been the case to every range I've ever been to. I assume this is the case pretty much everywhere. If you go to a gun range and you don't have a gun yourself, if you don't bring your own gun, you also need to bring a partner with you. You need to bring a buddy with you. And the reason for that is because they don't want people saying, hey, yeah, I'll take the Glock 19, I'll take the 9mm ammo, thank you very much, haha, they go in the range, they shoot themselves. If you bring a partner along with you, way less likely it's going to happen. I imagine it's still possible, some sort of fucked up suicide pact duo thing, but yeah. Suicide rates are higher in Japan where you cannot own one. I can see you're triggered, Mayor McCheese, but that's okay. Stick around with me. I haven't even made a prescriptive argument yet, but you're already being defensive. Guns make it way, way, way easier. I mean, much, much easier to just kill yourself in a whim, you know. It's always possible if you're, you know, persistent enough, but guns make it easier. And then the other big one is organized crime. That is to say, gang violence and the drug war. Now, people talk about this all the time, especially conservatives. Black on black crime. Well, usually what they mean by black on black crime is there are gangs in an inner city area and they fight with each other over territory, and they're protecting their respective abilities to distribute narcotics in that area. You know, that's usually what we're talking about. Because if there are gangs that are fighting over territory, they're not going to use knives. I mean, no, they use guns. Guns and the ready access to guns make it easier for them to engage in the kind of violence that they do at the level they do with the degree of lethality that they do. Now, those are the main ways in which the existence of firearms in this country hurt people. Now, even if you took away all firearms magically, let's say we're in Japan or the UK, none of these problems necessarily go away. Guns don't cause suicide. They make suicide easier to do. They don't cause violent crime. They make violent crime easier to do. And they do not cause mass death. They only make it easier to do. So what they really are is an enabler, a force multiplier. That's their job, after all. A person without a gun can hurt you by punching you or biting you. A person with a gun can kill you from thousands of feet away and then multiple other people around you without ever being seen. It's a very large multiplier, a big number, okay? So at thousands of feet, you'd have to be a very good shot. But, you know, still, principally, that's entirely possible. If you make it easier, aren't you causing it? There's a categorical difference between making a thing happen and making it easier to do a thing on its own. Now, all that being said, here's the argument that I like to make. We cannot reasonably get rid of guns in America. I'm really, really sorry. This is why I don't align with Democrats on this issue. The fact of the matter is, we have, as I said earlier, infinity guns in this country. Literally hundreds of millions of them. And those hundreds of millions of guns are collected in the armories and arsenals, the basements, the garages, the back of print trucks. You can make guns at home. And we share a massive contiguous border with Mexico. And you know where they get their guns from? Us. We build the guns. They buy them from us. Runners bring guns down south where they purchase them, sometimes legally, sometimes illegally, and they exist essentially as a repository, the ability for them to distribute firearms to us if we want to get them from there rather than from legal venues in our own country. Straw purchases are an incredibly common way of getting guns. You know what a straw purchase is? Normally, if you want to buy a gun, you go to a gun shop and you say, yo, and you buy a gun. They run a little background check on you. Usually they submit the background check to like the local police department. They run the background check. If everything comes up fine, later, a couple days later, you come and pick your firearm up. Now that does vary state to state. It's, you know, very, very, very much a relative thing. Some states it's harder, some it's easier. But straw purchases are when you just buy a gun from another person. You know how when you get a new car, you like buy a new car from a different person, you have to like license that vehicle in your name. You have to register it with your DMV. You can't just buy the car. You have to make the car yours. It has to be registered appropriately. Firearms, you know, in that respect, depending on laws in the area, work the same way. But people just buy guns anyway. There are probably tens of millions of unregistered firearms in the possession of Americans right now. Tens of millions. There is no law that can get rid of this. Absolutely none. You could get rid of 100 million guns from the US, and we would still have as many of them as we have people. There is no way in hell. Now, even if you passed the most aggressive possible federal legislation, do you think police departments would be cooperative? 80% voted for Trump police departments. Do you think that rural areas would turn over their guns? They just hide them? Do you think there's any chance whatsoever, I mean any chance, of being able to clean up even a fraction of the firearms that we purchase? Oh yeah, sorry, I should clarify. A straw purchase is made with the deliberate effort of getting a firearm to a person who could not otherwise obtain it legally. Thank you. And what's more, not only would an effort to just eradicate guns from this country be incredibly, impossibly difficult, moreover, it would be the biggest political optics hit that any party could take. Because, I'm sorry, we do have a Second Amendment. That is an amendment to the Constitution. No matter how you interpret it, no matter how you parse that, it is pretty inarguably unconstitutional to engage in the measure that I just described. You would have to get 2/3 of the states in this country to ratify the alteration or removal of that amendment. Do you think 2/3 of the states in America are going to go through with that? Not a chance. Gun regulation is always going to be edge case, minor alteration, sometimes state level adjustments to the total number of firearms. But there are a lot of really dumb fuck takes coming from chat right now. We need to chill out, okay? You guys need to calm down, all right? But you guys need to chill. People get so emotional about the gun issue. You really do need to calm down, okay? I'm sorry, it's not happening. Maybe some states make it harder to get firearms legally. But unfortunately, the Republicans are right on this one. I do think that especially when we're talking about criminal use of firearms, gun laws aren't going to prevent them. There are simply too many guns. They can be accessed way, way, way too easily. There are too many of them in circulation. I do not think it's going to work. Now, the reduction of available firearm ownership to your average American citizen will probably reduce the number of people who spontaneously kill themselves in a fit of suicidality or a partner of their own in a fit of domestic abuse. It would probably reduce the amount of spontaneous gun death which takes place. But again, this is assuming you're actually able to get these guns removed legislatively, practically. And you're going to alienate politically a lot of people if you try to do this. I swear, if the Democrats drop the gun issue, if they quit obsessing over the gun issue, oh my God, they could get so much more done. If they would stop constantly signaling to all those paranoid boomers out there that they're going to take away all their guns. It's just such an unbelievable optical loss for no gain. The amount, the gun laws we're passing have not been meaningfully cutting down on the proliferation of firearm violence. So it's not like we're effectively accomplishing anything positive. We're just treading water. You know, there are other countries where firearm ownership is much more ubiquitous than the norm around the world. Israel, for example, and Switzerland. In these countries, gun ownership, while not as high as the United States, it's actually a decent amount of it. And in spite of that, they don't have the gun problems that we do. And there's a reason for that. And I think it's cultural. See, here in America, the problem that we have with our guns usually seems as though it is downstream of a broader social issue that we have. So, for example, with the mass shootings that we experience, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we treat guns in this country like they're an extension of a masculine power fantasy. See, there are other countries where a gun is just a tool. And that's what it is, a tool. That's all a gun is. There are dangerous tools and there are harmless tools. There are plenty of power tools that you use during construction that you want to be careful with. Chainsaws are incredibly dangerous, but they're a tool. And nobody runs around doing big chainsaw murder sprees. Unless you're watching movies, in which case that happens all the time, But Firearms, an especially dangerous tool, are the item most often used to orchestrate death. Why? Well, when I wonder why, I think about the way our culture treats a man with a gun. Because that's a story. The man with the gun. That's the oldest story, almost. The idea that a man who's been wronged, emasculated in some way, deprived of something that is theirs, they fix the problem like a lone wolf. They address it, and they address it with excessive violence. And nothing does violence like a firearm. I mean, that's its job. It's the romanticization of guns, the narrative focus on guns being a tool by which you can get something taken from you. Why do school shooters do what they do? Well, there's a million reasons, but I would wager for most of them there's probably a commonality, okay? The common reason they do what they do, and it's usually men who do these school shootings, is because they think something was taken from them, and they don't think they're able to get it back, but they do think that a blaze of glory is the best way they can symbolically repossess the thing deprived of them. Does that make sense? I mean, there's a reason why it's almost always, with school shootings especially, like lonely, socially outcast white guys. There are lonely, socially outcast white guys in every country that has white people in it. So why America? And there are other countries too where you can get access to a firearm if you want to. Maybe not as easy here in America, but they can do it. But here in America is where we get that, because we have that story. I think it does really come down to toxic masculinity significantly. And what about gang crime? Tens of thousands of people die every year to firearm deaths on account of gang violence. Well, what are those caused, if not the drug war? Why does that happen if not the drug war? That didn't used to be a problem in majority black inner cities. You know what existed 50 years ago? Firearms, handguns. They were plenty lethal back then. You know what didn't exist back then? The same amount of gang violence. Why? Because of the drug war. I've talked about this before, but the fact remains that a lot of economic opportunity was stolen from these communities ye back 30, 40 years ago. The drug war really, really started to ramp up, especially under Reagan. And in the absence of economic opportunities, people still need to eat. Their parents still get sick and old. People need money to survive. So we turn then to the economic opportunities available to us. And in many of these areas, drugs were that economic opportunity. But drugs are illegal. You can't go to the cops if you're wronged. There's no way to sign legal contracts designating territory. So different gangs rise up and they fight over their territories and people die. Gangs, because of their nature, are generally violent and extremely indifferent to human suffering. Criminal organizations just tend to be like that, and they tend to bring a lot of suffering to their neighborhoods, even though they also tend to bring money in. And a lot of people die. How much blame does the NRA get to contribute to gun violence? Watch NRA TV and come back to me. Watch the John Oliver segment on NRA TV and then come back here, okay? Their content is deranged, constantly pushing this narrative that society is going to be destroyed. And the only thing standing between that happening and you is you with a gun. That is NRA TV. That's every story in NRA TV. It's making people less introspective, more deranged, more violent, more reactionary, more paranoid, more fearful. And that's what leads, by the way, to a lot of the gun ownership in this country. It's people being terrified. You know how much ammunition costs right now? A .357 Magnum round is like $250 online. I was lucky to get it for less than that. $250. You think that's a normal price every time you fire a bullet? It's a quarter of minimum wage? No. Ammunition's expensive because everyone's buying it, because people are scared. You got COVID-19, you got the Capitol attack of the riot, BLM, Biden becoming president. People have lost their mind. People are spending an enormous amount of money on ammunition and on firearms. Everything is harder to get. $5 for a 500 mag, yeah. Couldn't we prevent the manufacturing of ammo and primers? It's very difficult to make your own ammo without primers. First of all, there's already hundreds of millions of it in circulation that isn't going to be able to be seized by the government. Second of all, and I want to be clear about this because I haven't come down hard on this perspective yet, but I'm sorry. Under no fucking pretext shall arms be surrendered from the proletariat, you fucking soakdems, okay? You all need to chill. I see you people, fearful of guns. You know why? You've never fired one. They're a tool, and like all tools, they have their place. But rather than addressing the social issues that are specific to our country, like a coward, you try to destroy the tool, okay? You need to chill out, all right? There are hundreds of millions of guns here. We are not going to be getting rid of all of them. It is politically and practically impossible to do so. So what do we do then? Do we whine? Do we cry like babies? No. We fix social problems. We get rid of the drug war. We do everything in our power to get rid of the drug war, first and foremost. And you know what? This is often used in bad faith by conservatives to avoid culpability for their relationship to far-right terrorist violence. But mental health is an issue. It is. It is an issue. Yeah, it is. Okay? America is terrible when it comes to mental health. We don't provide mental health care for anybody. Everybody needs fucking Ambien. Okay, everyone in this country has lost their goddamn minds. And the ways in which we talk about mental illness only serve to further stigmatize it, okay? Everyone in America, everyone in the world, we all have a right to be a little crazy, okay? It's a crazy world. Is it getting crazier out there? We have a right. But as long as that's going to be the case, we should probably invest at least a fraction of our social wealth into addressing that problem. So we need to alleviate these problems. We need to alleviate income inequality. We need to alleviate we need to alleviate a lot of the cultural forces that lead people to being incapable of understanding when there is something wrong with themselves. What is your fundamental view on guns rather than practical legal? All of my fundamental views are informed by practical arguments. My fundamental belief on guns is that I don't want to live in a world where the only people who have them are people whose class interests are different than mine. It's that simple. If there's a real utopian solution to this, one that I've always been fond of is community armories. So if you have a firearm, rather than keeping it at your house, you store it in like a neighborhood armory. It could be one person designates their house, or they have a shack, or there's an actual building, or it's like a public library, and then, oh, there's the arsenal over there, and so on and so forth. And there are a number of ways that could be done. And I like that idea for a couple of reasons. First of all, it removes the ability to make snap suicide judgments. There's not just a gun in your closet. You'd have to drive 10 minutes. That actually does make a huge difference. It also means that in the heat of the moment, you can't kill a domestic partner in an argument. Instead, I guess you'll just hit them, which, while not great, is certainly preferable to shooting them, you know? How does that work if you need it for self-defense? Guns don't do that much good for self-defense. That's one of the narratives that I was talking about. The idea that, like, firearm ownership, the 99.9% of people who stockpile firearms, okay, they just have a big arsenal in their garage, and that's it. Nothing ever happens to them, okay? Most of the time, homes are invaded when nobody is at the house. Why would a robber ever want to actually come up against somebody who has the potential of shooting them? The good guy with the gun narrative is complete bullshit, okay? Like, seriously, it's complete bullshit. There are niche cases where it does work. I'm not saying it's impossible to defend yourself with a firearm, but yeah, the idea that this is some, like, big necessary thing for the most part, I just do not believe that's the case. But people stockpile guns and they'll be like, yeah, it's in case somebody attacks me. But so often this doesn't happen, you know? The most effective weapon that you can use to defend your house if it gets invaded is a baseball bat, for a number of reasons. One of the other reasons why keeping a firearm in your house because of home invasions could be very dangerous is because a lot of people die due to accidental death in the perceived home invasions, you know? Like, this happens really, really often. It'll be like, you know, you wake up on the second floor, you hear someone banging around downstairs. What's going on? You go on first floor, you see light, somebody turns around, you fire 3 shots. It was your son. They came home early from college. They just dropped in at 3 a.m. They just wanted to grab a bite to eat and surprise you in the morning. Goodbye. That happens. That happens. Because just because you have a gun doesn't mean you're trained how to use it. And it doesn't mean you have the kind of tactical awareness that is necessary to appropriately use firearms in a defensive situation. Does that mean that it's never helpful? No. Does that mean that there are no benefits to self-defense with firearms? No. But the narrative that this is some big thing, it's mostly bullshit. Goodbye, Timmy. That literally happened to my dad. His dad almost shot him with a shotgun in the middle of the night because he thought my dad was a home invader. And if he had shot him with a shotgun, that would have been that. And that would have been another story. Another statistic. So when we talk about firearms, let's be fact-based. Let's be compassionate, because I don't think ignoring people dying is a reasonable solution to this. Let's be forthcoming. So, Vosh, what are guns for? Guns are a tool that I think people have a right to use if they want. But if you want my real revolutionary LARPing perspective, I think that mass civilian firearm ownership makes it way difficult for militaries to hold territory. That's the main one, okay? That's the actual one. Could the proletariat of America rise up against its military? No, it could not. Don't be dumb. However, in instances where there are social fragmentations and schisms in different regions, conflicts arising, paramilitary groups taking to the streets, I would much rather have your average, honest, blue-collar, hardworking American citizen owning a firearm than not. Especially since if we have to deal with, at any point, a more... Literally, when is this going to happen? Your name is Cottagecore Lefty. Would you like to change that to Cottagecore Soakdem? Are there people in my community who think it's impossible, then, that society breaks down? What is wrong with you people? You think it's LARPy to say that firearm ownership can be helpful in ameliorating, like, conflicts between different regions should society break down? You think that's LARPy? I think that's a yes? Okay. Well, it's possible, but extremely unlikely. You guys believe in the... It is LARPy. Wow. My community sure has changed a lot in the past couple of months. That's impressive. You actually have arrived at the point where you don't believe it's possible that society breaks down. You literally said it was never going to happen in the stream. I said we're never going to defeat the American military in the stream. Pay attention. Wow, I'm actually really disappointed in you guys. Jesus. Yeah, so brief pointer on this one, okay? The idea that the American proletariat can rise up and just defeat the military is not going to happen. However, the idea that sometime within the next century there's a great social collapse, either economic or predicated on climate change refugees leading to paramilitary forces assembling at the border, social order breaking down as water becomes more scarce, energy shortages as we begin to run past peak oil and coal and it becomes harder and harder to power our cities. There are very real, very legitimate future possibilities that would lead to genuine social collapse. Okay? I just don't know how we're a couple of months out of what happened at the Capitol and you people think this is impossible. It's actually exceptional to me. You believe in the myth of the end of history, the idea that we've basically stabilized and all the remaining civil conflict, that's going to happen in the developing world. That's going to happen in Southeast Asia. That's going to happen in, you know, the Middle East. That's going to happen in Africa. But here in America and in Europe, no. We're safe. We're protected. Okay? You're a fool. And you should be ready. All right? Not because it's guaranteed to happen, but because it's a possibility that it might. And by the way, if it does happen and you're not ready, you could die. If it happens and you are ready, maybe you don't die. That's a nice bet, huh? Why'd you get a gun? If you read how many death threats that I get, you would have like 20, okay? Thank you. Robert Evans makes it pretty clear in his podcast it could happen here. I think now I understand why people in my community didn't care about the tanky arguments. It's because there are so many people in here who aren't even lefties. Just so you guys understand this, I'm not a reformist. At the end of the day, I do think revolutionary action will be the mechanism by which we achieve power. But I think in the meantime, reform are the means by which we consolidate our numbers and encourage more people to join our ranks. But at the end of the day, like, there's a lot of trouble on the horizon between conflicts over water and energy, between global climate change and all that. The idea that things are just going to be stable and peaceful and it's all electoral politics from here on out is a deeply naive worldview. And the fact that there are people here who think it's LARPy to say you should possess a firearm in case of the potential of future social collapse, that's pretty weird to me. I mean, you can enjoy, like, have fun, I guess. I hope you're like 60, in which case maybe you'll never get to see it. But if you're young, there's a decent chance that you will. That is a very real possibility, okay? And we're talking on a long time frame here. America is 250 years old. I'm going to live at least 50 more years, ideally. Some of you might even live longer. You really think like 50 years? Could you have even fathomed the difference between 1910 and 1960? Could you have even perceived what would have taken place between the end of the Civil War and the beginning of World War I? No. And I don't know what's going to happen 50 years from now either. But I do know the clock is running faster than it used to. Time's moving faster. History is cycling faster, okay? The real LARPers are the people who are pretending we can just live in suburbia forever, okay? That's your role play.